Hi, my name is Abby Levinsohn, and I'm here with Alex Fergusen, and we're team leaders from the Pathways Vermont Community Center. And today we'll be presenting on our center and a couple of approaches that we use to provide peer support. And our presentation is entitled Exploring a Community-Based Peer-to-Peer Approach to Mental Health and Wellness, Utilizing Intentional Peer Support and the Wellness Recovery Action Plan.
So the Pathways Vermont Community Center, which was previously called the Wellness Co-op, opened in the south end of Burlington on King Street in the spring of 2012. We received a mental health transformation grant, which started in the spring of 2012. It was geared towards 18 to 34-year-olds. That was our target population because they were seen as an underserved population. We developed our mission,
which was we aim to cultivate a vibrant community that supports resilience through collective learning, creative exploration, and mutual support.
We offered peer support coming from our own lived experiences with mental health challenges and drew from a training called Intentional Peer Support, which was developed by Sherry Mead in Vermont. It was and geared towards listening to people's untold stories and providing a lot of validation rather than problem solving. We learned to connect with people on a mutual level and delve into people's worldviews, offer tools for connection, and work to move towards learning and growing together. In I think it was the winter of 2014, we moved to 279 North Winooski Avenue and purchased that building. And in the following year, we began some renovations on the building. Thanks to CEDO, we got a community development block grant, which we installed a kitchen and a shower in the space, which creates more of a welcoming, open kind of cafe feel to that space. Now we offer free coffee, free tea, we have free Wi-Fi, and we host other groups and events in that space.
This is a picture in front of our center, just a bunch of community members, and this kind of shows how vibrant of a space we have at times, and just an example of a bunch of community members coming together. This is a couple of pictures at our 1-year anniversary. As you can see, it's a very comfortable space with couches and nice wooden tables. We have games and a lending library where you can read a book or borrow a book for a little bit.
We have some musical instruments too. We have a jam session on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. So yeah, we oftentimes have spontaneous jam sessions in the space throughout the week as well. We have upstairs, we have a meditation / art room, which we also offer groups in that space. Community members can utilize that space for other creative exploration, but we also host a mindfulness meditation, our Hearing Voices support circle, our peer support circle called Open Ears, Open Minds in that space as well. And this is a picture of our kitchen, which was, like I said, installed about 2 years ago through our community development block grant. There's a picture of some of our community members and volunteers helping out with our meals, which our community dinner is Wednesdays at 5 p.m. and we offer a lunch Thursdays at 1 p.m. Volunteers can help with the meals. There's a small kitchen training that we offer. It's about an hour, and it just kind of goes through basic safety and food prep in this space. Through this past year and the year prior, we started getting farm shares from local farms. This past year, we started working with Three Chimneys Farm, and we're able to get farm shares weekly from throughout the summer, and that's been a big help to our community.
So I'll talk a little bit more about the peer support aspect of our center, which is kind of our main mission, to come from our lived experience and offer mutuality so that we could form connections and really delve deep into people's stories. So there are always 2 peer support specialists on coverage at any time during our drop-in hours. And these peer support specialists are trained in intentional peer support, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And they are available for private one-on-one conversations in a closed-off room, or they could just talk amongst others in the space and hang out with people and just avoid isolation by being in a community center. So here, natural conversations emerge, and we're able to develop a really vibrant community where people can be open about mental health or talk about how they're doing in general. Oftentimes, we just have a laid back environment where people can talk about their day, their week, how things are going, and just talk about mutual interests and really just kind of be around other people and form community. While we can't prevent oppressive language and behavior, we will address any instances where there is a risk of having oppression or lack of acceptance. So, yeah, like I said, we're really able to be unique in the community because we come from our own lived experience with mental health challenges and provide an open ear for people to talk. So I'm also the employment team leader at the center, and we offer a really unique service. We have 2 employment specialists, including myself. And what's so unique about our space is we have no paperwork or prerequisites, so it's really easy to get hooked up with our services. People can drop in or just call or email, and we set up a meeting. On usually our initial meeting is all together as a team, and we're able to learn about people's goals and dreams and really get to know the person and delve into their story. So we're able from there to set up weekly meetings, and we help with everything from the resume to the cover letter to the interview skills and applications. We meet with people usually on a weekly basis, and we also incorporate peer support again, so that also makes our services very unique. Something that we do is job development, where we go out into the community and meet with employers to learn what their needs are and what they're looking for when they're hiring, so that we could be a resource to them and to the employment seeker if there's a good fit. We also offer moral support and encouragement, pep talks, and just someone to process the really overwhelming idea of getting a job and getting back into a working environment after sometimes having a large gap. We also refer people to community resources like Voc Rehab and Mercy Connections. We're very connected to all the other centers and a lot of the other resources that people might need to either help with financial things or education or other things that might be part of the employment process. Here's a picture from the employment celebration. We honored people for where they were at in the process, whether they had gotten a job or they were just working hard towards getting a job and making successes along the way, even getting an interview or things like that. This is a picture of our specific groups that we have. I lead the writing circle, which is a very structured circle. We have prompts, and we start with a poem and a check-in and a quote, and then we have a free write for about 30 minutes. And then as people are sharing their writing, the other people will write verbatim words and phrases that they liked from the writing, and then I create a found collage poem for the following group. So it really kind of fuels creative juices and is just a great space for people to, express themselves. We also have the Open Ears, Open Minds peer support group, which is a confidential community circle which thrives on mutuality and connection. So here people can check in about how they're doing, their day, their week, and just kind of get that mutual support and be in a safe space to be able to talk about those things.
We also have, so our Hearing Voices Support Circle is one of the only groups that we know of in the state that offers support to individuals that not only hear voices, but experience other like natural phenomena in their life. So that could be dreams, visions, sounds, smells, just like touch, and sometimes just like that feeling of like something being next to you out of the corner of your eye. It's very a broad concept that is misunderstood or misinterpreted. So that group meets Tuesdays at 2 p.m. at the community center, and it's an open group. It is confidential, but it does aim to provide support to specifically individuals that identify with that. We also offer open jam session, a little more relaxed type of group that's not confidential in any way. You can just join in. That's Tuesdays at 3 p.m. just following the Hear Voices support circle. You can just pretty much walk in, drop in the community center, and join the group. We have a bunch of different instruments in the space, as you saw in that last slide that we showed you. And like I said, that's Tuesdays at 3 p.m.
Sorry, the writing circle is Wednesdays from 4 to 5, right before the community meal. And the Open Ears, Open Minds group is Fridays from 1 to 2. We also have a mindfulness group where a guy who's trained in transcendental meditation in 1971 leads an informal meditation, just holding the space to be able to sit with others and be mindful and just meditate, either a little bit guided or pretty free flowing sometimes too. Here's just a picture of some community members in the space. We have artwork that a local artist, rotating artist, puts up, but you could see in the middle picture.
We also do, so with the artists, we have workshops monthly, just hosting opening and closing of those artists in the space.
Mm-hmm. We also, just to note, have a couple of volunteer positions, and right in the middle, that's Steve, one of our volunteers who greets people in the space. We also offer volunteering for outreach, and sometimes volunteers help out in the kitchen for the meals as well.
And as you see, there's another community member there drinking some coffee. That's a big draw for people as well. We have free coffee. It's really good. It's donated by Brio, which is on Pine Street.
Here's just a picture again of the community in the space. And yeah, it's, a lot of people really find their community here and are able to avoid being at home alone and connecting with others in our great community space. So now I'm going to get into one of the trainings that guides our practice, and this is called the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. So this is a self-derived tool where individuals identify personal struggles and then create action plans to address those struggles as they come up. The RAP was developed by Mary Ellen Copeland and others who had been living with a variety of mental health challenges in Vermont in 2003. They developed a plan to feel better and to get on with their lives. Before starting with the actual RAP, it's helpful to note the 5 key concepts that drive recovery and are important for the implementation of RAP. The first is hope. Without hope that things can change and feelings can improve, it's really hard to move forward. So hope helps us see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and knowing that the individual can get well and stay well for long periods of time and people can move toward and meet goals to lead a happy and productive life. The next key concept is personal responsibility. This says that a person is the expert on themselves and they know what they want and need, and it's up to them to take personal responsibility for their wellness and life. While sometimes we rely on other people, ultimately it's only the individual who can reverse a negative or difficult path. But after taking that responsibility, it's also important to educate oneself to make good decisions about treatment, lifestyle, career, relationships, living space, leisure activities, and all aspects of life. In knowing what resources are out there, it will be easier to assign specific tools to confront any issues. If I know that I'm easily triggered by a certain thing, I can better inform myself about how to deal with those triggers. Knowing that an individual is the ringleader of their own recovery, it's also important that a person self-advocates. So self-advocacy is the fourth key concept, and this includes going for it, with courage, persistence, determination, expressing oneself clearly so that you can get what you need in life. Finally, the last key concept is support. Everybody needs support, and this can be from friends, family, care providers. We really can't lead our lives completely alone, as much as some people are introverted and, self-reflect, like alone time. Sometimes others need to help out or even take over in our recovery process. So before starting the wrap, the first part is creating a wellness toolbox. So these are the things one does to keep themselves well and the things that help them feel better. These are the things one has to discover independently or are learned from others. These tools can be literal or figurative. I like to be very specific. So instead of saying something like deep breathing, I might list specific techniques like the 4-7-8 breathing. And instead of just putting sleep, I might put specific sleep hygiene like listening to soft music, reading a book, getting to bed by 10 p.m., or watching a TV show. I can put different types of exercise or people that I can call to talk through a hard time. The toolbox can be as expansive as one likes, and this is where the action plans for the actual wrap are derived. So the first part of the wrap is called the daily maintenance plan. This is split into 3 parts. So the first part is what are you like when you're well? So I try to be really realistic. So I might say that on a good day, I'm friendly and outgoing at times, but knowing that I can also, on a good day, am a little introverted and self-reflective, and have low and high energy depending on how I feel. I can say that I maintain good hygiene when I'm well, that I'm a good friend. This helps me identify that when I do not look this way, I may be slipping with my wellness. The next part of the daily maintenance plan lists what I need to do every single day to stay well. These are the bare essentials. I might put things like brush my teeth, shower, get an hour of mental stimulation, or an hour of relaxation. I know that I have to commit to these things every single day. Finally, the next part I might do are things I might do to stay well. I could put exercise, because if I don't do that every single day, I'll still, it won't be the end all be all. So the next part is triggers. These are the external events, like sickness, weather, or someone yelling and being aggressive. These are outside of our control, and a person can list all the things that affect their mood on a daily or even occasional basis. Then you create an action plan. So for each trigger. So in my rap, I list point by point with each trigger. For example, if I'm triggered by a person who is aggressive, I can tell myself a specific mantra to not be fazed by them, or confront them with honesty, or take space. So these are kind of trying to nip things in the bud. If for some reason you are affected by the trigger, the early warning signs are the first internal response to stress. There may be subtle changes like starting to feel anxiety, or feeling heated by a rude comment. Again, one will create an action plan for each early warning sign. I might go for a walk, or, count my breaths up until 10. This is to help from slipping into a negative space. And these are attempts to keep my mental health from spiraling. Um, if for some reason it does amplify or blow up, the next part is when things are breaking down. And these are, the amplified emotions. If anxiety is the early warning sign, panic attacks might be when things are breaking down. And again, I have action plans for each one. So I might see a therapist, or talk in depth with a peer, or go to a peer support respite. Finally, if things turn into crisis, the final part of the plan is the crisis plan, which is broken into 9 parts. And this is the part where others need to take over for your care. Things are kind of out of control. So the 9 parts of the crisis plan are what I'm like when I'm well again, signs that other people need to take over, who are the supporters in my life, what medications do I want, what treatments do I want, what kind of home, community care, respite places might be good for me, what treatment facilities I prefer. I might prefer the Brattleboro Retreat over UVMC, how others can help, and then finally when my supporters no longer need to use this plan. So this is kind of like an advanced directive, but it's not legally binding. So that's the last part. And then finally, you'll have a post-crisis plan to reintegrate into life, thank those that have supported you, and take action to help one from falling back into crisis. So that's my spiel about the RAT. Now we're going to go to intentional peer support.
So I'm just going to do a brief overview of intentional peer support training. Normally, it is a 5-day intensive training. Intentional peer support was developed by Sherry Mead in Vermont. And like I said, so generally you go through a 5-day intensive training, but we're just going to kind of go through the key concepts of IPS. So to start off, we have the 3 principles, from helping to learning together, from individual to relationship, and from fear to hope and possibility. And in depth, we would normally go through and talk about each individual principle, but we'll talk a little bit about that through the slides.
So yeah, you can think about a relationship where someone inspired you to move through your comfort zone. What were the qualities of that relationship that allowed you to take risks? So we'll get into some of the qualities that intentional peer support defines, which Alex will go into further detail about.
So in terms of from helping to learning and like what that means, it's like, what is my role in this relationship? I'm going to read a little piece from the core training book. So in terms of like general service relationships, it's usually a one-way street, and both people's roles are clearly defined. But in regular relationships in your community, people give and take all the time. No one is permanently on the taking or giving side. This exchange contributes to people feeling okay about being vulnerable and needing help, as well as confident about what they're offering. For many of us, being in the role of the getter all the time has shaken our confidence, making us feel like we have nothing worthwhile to contribute. Peer support breaks all that down. It gets complicated somewhat when one of us is paid, but modeling this kind of relationship in which both of us learn offers us the real practice we need in order to feel like a regular community member. So, in terms of these relationships, what might I think my purpose is in the relationship? Are you the helper, the helpee, the learner? And to ask yourself these questions, like, how might I start to think of myself if I'm always in this role? How might I measure success in this relationship? And whose needs am I often meeting? Are you the giver or the taker? Another principle is from individual to relationship, and that kind of transcends what we were just talking about. When it's about the individual, no one else has to change. It's about me. We predetermine outcomes, we lose sight of learning, and we lose sight of relational dynamic. When it's about the relationship, both people contribute. There's more mutuality. We learn how to communicate with honesty and openness, and our relationship becomes a model of other relationships. From fear to hope. Fear-based relationships are based on what is wrong, and as opposed to what happened to an individual. Hope-based relationships are what are other possibilities, and learning and growing together.
Sometimes we have to sit through discomfort, so our initial reaction might be fear, but sometimes if we're able to respond rather than react to the fear that is innate and we can't control sometimes, then we can have hope to learn and grow together as a relationship and maybe explore possibilities that weren't there beforehand because we were shut down by the fear that we had.
So the 4 tasks, this is really the beef of the training, is connection, worldview, mutuality, and moving towards. And we do try to look at this like as a specific order as to how we communicate with people. Connection, we have a little picture there of mushrooms because the background of this is they talk about mycelium and how it's kind of an unseen root system that connects everyone. And it's kind of the first step of how we might start a conversation with someone, establishing trust. But, it's connection, a sense of belonging. We're in it together, building trust, which leads to learning for both of us and moves the focus away from the individual and into the relationship. Here's just some examples of disconnects. And, it's not always a negative thing to disconnect. Sometimes in conversations, we might reestablish a connection after disconnecting with someone. There's some interesting photos there for you. So here are just some examples of disconnects you might have. And so here's kind of what I was just talking about: connection, disconnection, reconnection. And sometimes this happens like in one conversation. You could disconnect with someone, reconnect, and it's not always a negative thing. Like I said, we oftentimes practice this on a daily basis. There's some questions to ask yourself too. What do you need to reconnect in a relationship? What do you need from someone else to reconnect? That mutuality and kind of meeting each other where you're at is another concept in intentional peer support. Worldview. This could be a tricky concept for some individuals. What is worldview? And what are some influences to create worldview? What is someone's perspective on life and where they're coming from? And, how can you honor that?
How might trauma have impacted how you come to see the world?
Why worldview? Here are some different examples of like what Abby was saying, like trauma. How can we open our minds a little bit to see someone's untold story and getting curious about, where they're coming from. Seeing through your worldview is another important part of it, is not shutting yourself down and being authentic, where your perspective does have a part in this relationship, but being conscious of assumptions and what you might how you might react, and thinking about how you could respond first.
we might make some assumptions about the picture in this slide. Maybe we might think she's praying or looking out the window because she's sad, but how would you approach connecting with her through learning about what she actually is feeling and what is behind the initial assumptions that we make, like that she
You might say, you know, what's wrong with her, right? But, you know, another way to approach that might be like, what happened to you is what we say.
And what's really underneath the outside external thing that we first make our reaction about.
Just another slide, kind of examples of worldview and assumptions. How might someone's assumption change if we tell you she's in a psychiatric hospital, you know? And then another clarity, I want to just clarify that peer support is not based on psychiatric models of diagnosis either. So it is trying to meet people where they're at and looking past, you know, our own judgments. Belief systems. Think of a belief system you hold on to. You know, maybe that's a religious belief, a spiritual belief, maybe just a general opinion. How does that belief system influence what you hear and see in the world? Would you like it? Would it be like if you were told you had to give it up? You had to just put that to the side. Reflecting on mutuality, think of a situation where you and another person were able to help each other through a difficult situation. How did you feel about yourself? How did it impact the relationship? So here are some examples of redefining like what help looks like versus, you know, moving away from a service type of relationship where you're in that helper role all the time. We try to practice, you know, learning and growing together. You know, rather than doing things for individuals, we try to do things with each other. Maybe that's, you know, you're willing to make a phone call with someone and not necessarily, you know, take over and do things for them. And it's only working if it's working for both of us. You know, that's just the concept of like trying to identify that we're meeting each other halfway and not always bearing the weight of a relationship all the time.
Mm. And being honest and authentic with knowing that sometimes if I'm only giving and being the helper, then I'm draining myself of my ability to be a support to someone, and that's not really creating mutuality. So how can I be okay in this relationship for the person receiving the support and the person providing support?
Mutual responsibility. In terms of like the relationship and sharing the responsibility, I think it helps to create a healthier dynamic in a relationship, and that you're emulating like shared experience, more mutuality between each other, and then kind of not setting it up for failure in terms of other relationships in your life. Moving towards is like the last task, and it seems kind of like gray, I think, at first. And like I said, if you were to take the 5-day training, you get a little more of evaluation on it. But the energy between us when we are creating new ways of seeing, knowing, and doing through the relationship. Sort of that last task is just, you know, we finally kind of met each other where we're at, and we're moving towards like a mutual goal.
Yeah, it's kind of the culmination of the 3 other tasks. So when all those are working, we're learning and growing together and creating something new.
Peer support is about putting energy into mutual learning relationships as opposed to service relationships. Connecting and reconnecting the family, our culture, and the community. Helping each other to take a look at how we've come to make sense of the world, and redefining mental health and how those relationships might look. Figuring out how to make this work for both of us, and supporting and challenging each other to move towards the life that we both want, and changing the world.
So that's the conclusion of our presentation. Hopefully you have a better understanding of the center in general, what we offer, and how we create relationships in a unique way by providing peer support and also self-care so that we can maintain a healthy relationship and be able to offer some of that giving and help sometimes to other people who might be struggling with something that maybe we've had lived experience with.
Yeah, thank you for having us. So we have a couple questions here. I do want to just throw out there too, another core concept we didn't go over in terms of intentional peer support is the untold story. So we definitely try to focus on being curious about someone's untold story. Just wanted to put that out there.
So one of the questions was, can you tell me about the Pathways Vermont support line? So who answers the phone, days, time, confidentiality? So the Vermont Support Line is another program of Pathways, and this is a free phone number that you can call and talk to another peer support worker who is able to listen and validate and just basically be an open ear. That this often diverts people from accessing crisis or other services that maybe they just need that connection. Maybe they just need to process. We again don't come from a very fear-based approach, so we practice harm reduction and not jumping to necessarily problem solving or trying to fix the situation. So
similar to the community center too, like an individual could call the support line and start to develop a relationship with someone, and you can request callers, you can request support line operators. I mean, and they have the same trainings as that we take at the community center.
Mm-hmm. It's open every day, or you can talk to someone any day of the week, and we're running from 3 p.m. and we just are extending hours to 6 a.m. So that's a long time for people to be able to have those supports that maybe in the middle of the night they wouldn't be able to get other supports for.
It is a confidential service, and like Abby said, we do practice, sitting in discomfort and listening to untold stories. But there are, some limitations to that because, working for Pathways, we still are mandated reporters. We do have a duty to warn, but we do, I think, do our best to kind of stretch and push through the discomfort of a conversation.
The next question is, what ages do you serve in your employment program? What is the cost? So I forgot to mention that all of our services are free at the center, including employment support. So we're an adult space, so we serve people 18 and older. So that's true with the employment program too. And really anybody can access our services. I forgot to mention that too. So we get referrals from all over the community, some people just dropping in. And so we really just have a very unique service because you don't have to identify with a disability or necessarily have a certain diagnosis. So we see people with all different experience and life stories. And again, it's free for anybody. So we're able to really delve into people's stories, which is a unique part of our employment support.
Another question I see here is how much information do you share about yourself when practicing intentional peer support? And I would say that really depends on the individual that you're getting support from. And for myself, I could say a practice I might have is to ask permission first, and sort of getting to know the individual that I'm creating a relationship with, and then maybe asking permission, listening to their story first, and then I might say, hey, would you mind if I tell you a story about myself? Or, if there's a point in the conversation where something comes up and I feel a connection, sometimes that can establish a stronger connection. I feel is like sharing a little bit about myself. In no way do I try to, you know, unload any of my trauma on someone. So I might just kind of keep somewhat of a boundary there, but it definitely looks a lot different than most clinical service relationships.
I'd like to thank you for joining our webinar today. We're going to save this webinar on our website along with a copy of the PowerPoint. We'll also be putting it on our YouTube channel. We have more than 80 webinars there, so you can check those out. We also have a lot of other resources, information about upcoming webinars and events on our website. I wanted to let everyone know if you ever need any help from Vermont Family Network, we are here to empower and support all Vermont families of children with special health care needs or disabilities. We welcome your calls, and you can reach us toll free at 1-800-800-4005. Have a great day. Thank you.